There we go. Okay, we're good.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Albemarle County Planning Commission for March 1, 2022 to order. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A-16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on our website at www.albemarle.org/community/county-calendar as available. Can we call the meeting to order and establish quorum?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Bailey is not there, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Carazana?
Present.
Ms. Firehawk?
Here.
Mr. Missile?
Here.
Mr. Bivens?
Here.
Ms. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Claiborne?
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So our next item on the agenda is other matters listed that are not on tonight's agenda. So any comments from the public on any items not on tonight's agenda? Carolyn, do we have anyone signed up to speak, or is there anyone out there in public cyberland that would like to make a comment?
Nobody has their hand raised at this time.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which actually there's nothing on the consent agenda, so skip that. And we'll move right on into public hearings. The first public hearing we have scheduled for this evening is SB 2021-00018 Greenbrier Veterinarian Expansion. Can we have the staff report?
Sure. For those who are maybe listening, I'm Bill Fritz. I'm with the Community Development Department of the county. This is a special use permit. I'm going to share a screen here with you. 2 seconds. We'll play nice. There you are. This is a special use permit. This property is located on Greenbrier Drive. What's being proposed is there currently is a vet approved for this building here. It was approved back in the 90s. They've had a couple special use permits to allow an expansion, changing in hours of operations and a variety of things. And what they're proposing to do is to expand into the other buildings on the property. So right now it's limited to 370 Greenbrier, and they want to be able to go into 380 and 386. I'll go too quick. This map shows you the zoning around it. And this particular property has split zoning of HC and C1. That's highway commercial and C1. All the properties around it are zoned commercially. You can see industrial off to the south. You can see other commercial activities located in the area. That dark green are NMD developments. The nearest residential development, so the nearest residential unit to this property is over 700 feet away. And that's to the property line, not even to the buildings. This just shows you the building and the layout. Sometimes some people have a little trouble with the aerial photo, so I thought I'd give this one to you. This request is very straightforward, I think, or at least that's our recommendation. We are recommending approval. This property has been approved for a vet multiple times. It's operated since the 90s with no known issues whatsoever. The applicant is simply asking to have the flexibility to be able to occupy any portion of the buildings on this property. They don't believe they will occupy all of the buildings, simply that's a lot of space, but they want to have the flexibility to be able to move around as they offer additional services at on the property. There was a community meeting held on this last week. there were no comments on this at all. So staff is recommending approval. There's only one condition, and that is to change the existing condition that limits it to 370 to 370, 380, and 386, and you have that in your staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Fritz?
Yeah.
Okay, I see Mr. Claiborne has a question. Go ahead.
Hey, Bill, thank you for the presentation. My only question is, does the main entrance change any with this expansion, or does that remain as is?
Nothing changes. Nothing. The entrance doesn't change. The parking doesn't change. The buildings don't change. Really, the only thing exterior change might be signage. But other than that, there are no changes proposed to the property. There's a site plan that's been approved on this property. It's in compliance with that site plan. So,
thank you, sir.
welcome.
Okay, Mr. Bivens.
So I have a question on recommended action on item number 1, where it says, we were talking about there shall be no outside exercise area. However, walking of animals is permitted and shall be delineated. It's the shall be. Could you, where'd Bill go? Okay, there he is. Can you just give me a little bit more about what why the shall be as opposed to may be?
That was simply a condition that happened from the previous approvals. They're not asking for any change there. And it was simply that an area be marked as the area that would for animal walking.
But there doesn't have to be a fence there.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, anyone else have a question about this application for staff? All right, I don't see anybody's hands up, so I guess we're ready to move on to presentation by the applicant. Do we have a presentation for tonight? Can you not hear me?
Joe, we can't hear Joe.
Oh,
Joe.
How about now?
Yeah.
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
You
And
look
you're-
like Gilroy was here.
can you tilt your screen? You're kind of cutting your head off.
Oh, okay. Just to update you, since the initial permit was allowed back in the 90s, it was for an emergency room, which does service all of Charlottesville, Albemarle, and cities fairly wide in other counties. When the modifications will allow it to expand into the rest of the building, the concentrations that have been picked up are surgery, 3 internal medicine doctors, a cardiology doctor, and an oncology doctor. And previous to that, you had to go to Richmond or Northern Virginia for any pet oncology, cardiology, which it was a service much needed in the community. So what they're hoping is that a few of the tenant spaces in the other 2 buildings, and we don't know which ones, would be to expand to pick up dermatology, ophthalmology, and also rehab and recovery for the emergency room, and neurology. Because these right now, the closest would be Mannequin Sabat or downtown Richmond, and that's where clients have to travel with their pets to get those concentrations in specialty medicines. So as Bill said, it doesn't mean that all of the buildings would be veterinarian use, but the way it works with tenant spaces is over time, as they become available and more veterinarians want to relocate there, they would have the flexibility, and the special use permit is a prerequisite of that. So it just gives flexibility for the future to move around and possibly make this a more full service location. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer.
Sure, thanks very much. And Joe, I didn't get your last name because we were having trouble with your audio.
Joe Higgins.
Thank you. So everyone who's listening can hear that. All right, so does anyone have any questions for Ms. Higgins about the application? It's pretty straightforward, but. Okay, Mr. Bivens, and then after.
So what I imagine when you expand to, I guess 3 things. Right now, there are not any empty buildings or any buildings that are for immediate sort of occupancy. When you do, will there be additional entrances so that, well, right now you come in off of that one side road. So if you were to come around the back, would there be an entrance over there, or will everyone continue to use the main entrances?
These buildings all face outwards and have individual doorways into tenant spaces.
Mm-hmm.
What the special use permit does is just allow a tenant space to be used for vet.
Okay.
Right now there is Cardinal Paint. There's actually a retail ethnic food place. But no, the entrances, the only reason they would change is if 2 units are rented, then they might close off one door. Or if they split a unit, there's already doors built into the building architecture. So it's very typical of a strip mall kind of thing.
The reason I asked, because the practice in Richmond that you referred to, they've managed, it's sort of one city block now. It started off as disparate buildings, but it's one city block. And so if you go in one entrance, you can actually get over to the other practice. And I just wondered if that was what you might be envisioning there.
Well, what's also becoming very routine is to consolidate the reception area so that offices could go off of that. And should they get enough to consolidate, I think they do that somewhat through the emergency clinic that feeds into the next unit. But it's very difficult to do unless your building was originally designed for that. But they have interconnected some of the units. So an animal that gets a treatment can go to rehab, go to a overnight observation in another unit, and they don't go outside.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Carazana.
Thank you. Just a brief question. It sounds like what you're envisioning here is a full-service veterinary hospital, which would be fantastic. In terms of parking, do you feel that there's enough parking within that site to accommodate that in the future, or do you foresee having to expand?
The way this works is whenever a tenant were to change over, they have to go to zoning for a zoning clearance. At that time, that use has to verify that there's available spaces. So right now with the mixture of uses, there's various parking requirements applied. And we feel like there's enough parking overall because with veterinarian use, you actually don't count the space that's used for animal storage. And in the past, that hasn't been tracked very closely, but we feel like in a general sense that this could serve much more veterinarian use. But I will say it took about 5 years to get the expansions to pick up these other specialties. And we don't know if that could take another 5 years or much further. It really is up to the individual vets that want to come. But the parking, they cannot rent spaces to someone if the parking requirements are not met. And Bill could verify that.
That's all correct.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a good location for that service.
Okay. Anyone else have questions on this site? All right. I don't see anyone stirring. Jenny, were you moving? I feel like an auctioneer. Sold to the woman in the bottom corner. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and open it to the public. And do we have anyone signed up to speak? I didn't receive any advance names, but has anyone since signed up to speak to this from the public?
No, ma'am, I don't have anybody with their hand up, and I didn't have anybody sign up early.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We'll end the public comment period, and then the applicant still has a chance to make another comment if you'd like. Usually it's in response to the public, but is there anything else you wanted to say?
The response from the public to anyone we've spoken, of course, we sent letters out. We haven't heard from any. One was returned for problem with the address, but we haven't heard that. But in generally speaking, the clients and the community has been very supportive because traveling when you have even at the community meeting, one lady mentioned that her dog had been bit by a snake. Another one was a chocolate incident. Having that in the community is really helpful to us with our beloved pets. That's Lily. She wants it. So that's all I have to say.
Yes, we didn't include Lily in the public comment.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'll bring it back then to commissioners for deliberation. Lily doesn't have much to say right now. Any other discussion about this particular application? All questions and concerns have been addressed and answered. All right, then, with that, is someone prepared to make a motion for approval or denial?
Sure, I'm happy to make a motion since Commissioner Bailey's not here. I would move the recommended, or I move to recommend approval of SP 2021-000-18 Greenbrier Veterinary Expansion with the conditions outlined in the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I got it from Julian. It was tied with Corey, but we'll give this one to Julian. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go ahead and call the question. Carolyn?
Right. Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye. Ruff.
Mr. Nissel,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Yes.
Mr. Carazana.
It froze there.
Did you say
You
yes?
call my name?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sorry. It froze right before she called me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, did we get all the way through? Yes, I think so. Okay,
Yes,
great. So the motion passes and you'll now advance to the Board of Supervisors for final review. So thank you very much for bringing this to us. And also, I'll just note, very good thinking on planning for the future so you don't have to come back space by space to the Planning Commission every time someone has a new interest in leasing a space.
And thank you all for your support.
All right, great. All right, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. ZMA 2021-406 Maplewood. May we have the staff report?
Yes, did you want me to share the slides?
Sure, if that's part of the staff report. You see down at the bottom of your screen, your little green share box.
It's covered up by my monitor. Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Okay, can you all see the slides now?
No.
Not yet, but sometimes it takes a minute.
It might take a sec.
It seems like it's coming.
There we
There we
go.
go.
How about that? Okay,
We've got it, Ben, thanks.
thank you, everybody. This item, ZMA 2021.
Hey, Ben, you're gonna want to maximize that. We're seeing multiple screens.
Oh, let's see, hang on.
Just go to presenter mode. Yep, there you go.
Where's the link for presenter mode? Sorry.
From beginning over there.
From beginning. Resume slideshow. Are you seeing two monitors? Is that what's happening?
Now we just now we're seeing your other one.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me move it over to my other monitor. Maybe that'll fix it. Apologies, we'll get up and going here in a second.
There we see it again. You just need to maximize it.
Ben, I'm sorry, if you look at the bottom, there's a little, it looks like a slide screen. Yeah, just to the right. Keep going. One more. Yep. One more.
Right
Yeah,
there.
I think that does it.
All right, let's try this again. Nope. So you all can't see any slides whatsoever?
Yeah, no, we see your thumbnails. Hold on one sec.
Okay, all right, let me, it's enlarged on my other monitor. So if I had turned it off, maybe I wouldn't have this issue. Hang on a second.
You might want to unshare your screen.
Yeah, why don't you just unshare and we'll get you going again.
Share the different.
There we go. All right, I'm just going to enlarge the screen since it's not letting me pick the right one.
Is that only the one, the far right one? If you click on that one again, down the lower right.
The very right-hand corner is, it's, you toggle over. It's fit the current window, so I can just enlarge it. How about that? Is that visible? Is it taking up most of the screen?
That's better.
Okay.
We
Sorry
can
about
see
the
it. Go
technical
ahead.
difficulties, everybody.
It's okay.
So this application is a zoning and map amendment for housing complex. They'd like to rezone the property from C1 commercial to PRD, planned residential development. Current zoning is C1 commercial, and overlay districts that apply are airport impact and entrance corridor. And let me back up a second just to talk about location. Location's at the intersection of Prophet Road and 29. The comprehensive plan, this area is designated as urban mixed use and centers. Primary use listed for that is retail, residential, commercial, office, institutional, open space. Specifically, they're rezoning from C1 to PRD so that they can develop the property with a maximum of up to 102 units or 30 units per acre. Applicant has mentioned that they intend to develop 2/2 style townhomes, which we'll discuss in detail later. Here's the concept plan that they've shown us, and this has been revised a couple times by the applicant. Currently shows 6 buildings, 3 open space areas, and a 10-foot multi-use path. This illustrated plan shows the same layout with just a little bit more detail. The primary open space area is at the lower left. That includes a tot lot, a playground, a grass field, a dog park. And then in the middle and on the right-hand side, you have 2 more open space areas. And that includes a 10-foot multi-use path in the brown line that kind of skirts the edge of the property. Here was an illustrative example that the applicant provided just to give an idea of what the 2/2 style townhomes might look like. And we'll go through the factors that are favorable. The request is consistent with the majority of the neighborhood model principles. It's also consistent with the county's growth management policy, consistent with the Places 29 master plan recommendations for green space. And I'd like to commend the applicant because we worked with them closely to revise their plan and improve the open space to what it is shown right now. So this request now includes new pedestrian facilities, the 10-foot multi-use path that'll enhance pedestrian connectivity in the area. The request also includes provisions for affordable housing units, and that aligns with the comprehensive plan and county's housing policy. Not much to note for unfavorable factors. The comp plan does recommend that they have multiple housing types, but the applicant did point out in their narrative that these 2/2 style townhomes essentially offer different price points and size units. Smaller unit typically at the bottom and a larger unit at the top. It's like a stacked townhome. with one unit on top of the other. So staff does recommend approval of this request. And if the commission chooses to adopt, staff would just recommend that they cite the reasons stated in the staff report. And if for any reason they wish to recommend denial, please state your reasons for denial. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions for Ben? Mr. Bivens. Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, good to see you this evening. So I've got a couple of questions. So I think a couple of months ago, an applicant, I don't recall if it's this one, came before us and asked us to look at the adjoining property with the hope that they were going to put commercial over there. Do you have any sense right now? I've got a couple other questions too after I ask this. Do you have a couple of senses? Do you have a sense now what if anything is in play for the property that's adjacent to it to the left-hand side?
I can't speak to that. The applicant's representative might be able to answer that question.
Okay, so we'll just put a pin into that for that. The other thing that I have a question about is, so we've had this once before where someone wanted to use or wanted to sort of appropriate the commercial, the adjacent commercial activity into a PRD to sort of satisfy the mixture of uses. And I'm going to look to Charles on this. I don't quite remember how we sat down on that or how we came through with that, but I have a feeling that we were real appreciative of that kind of approach. That's my recollection.
Are you talking about on the piece that we heard about a year or so ago, adjacent to the food line? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to dive back into that.
So I'm just going to put that as a note of that here. That in fact, I think this is one of the things that we talked about when we were looking at what might happen and what might change in the comp plan. Is that we've got this one type of zoning that forces, how should I say, some sort of some gymnastics in order to say, yes, this is what we really need, when in fact it really doesn't apply to that. It doesn't apply to this. It doesn't fulfill the various requirements for that kind of zoning. So that's, again, I'm sort of, we're back again. So thinking that we should hopefully think about that when we move forward with types of things. And then my last question, and I guess, Chair, these are more comments than they're questions. I'm sorry. I have to get back. My last question is, so I am one of those individuals that really sort of shudders at the possibility of losing commercial land. That's just something that really I have a hard time saying yes to, because we have such a small inventory of it. So one of the questions I had, and Ben, can be for you. Have you talked to the economic development people to make sure that they're aware that this is happening? And if not, then I suggest you do. And then the other thing is, and so I'll be quiet. Is there an opportunity in the neighborhood to make sure that commercial property actually gets released from some other project that the applicant might have, or in fact, we're sure that the piece that's next to it is going to be commercial, is going to be put to commercial use, because we're running out of commercially zoned property in this community, and that's not a good thing.
Yes, Mr. Bivens, just a couple things to answer your question as best as I can. I'd like to point out the comprehensive plan calls for, commercial mixed use in centers. So staff's general evaluation of this proposal at this specific site is that it does align with the comprehensive plan, because there is already adjacent commercial within this center next door to it. You've got the Walgreens, and then you have another commercial property. I think it's the auto parts store. So if you look at the contiguous parcels as a whole, it is mixed use. I do believe economic development was alerted of this project when it first was assigned. I've actually inherited it from another planner, so I can't answer that with 100% certainty, but I think they have had eyes on this. And then About the commercial property being released, I can't answer that one.
So we've looked at, thank you, that's helpful. I would suggest for your own, just for your own knowledge, that you might want to check back in with economic development as
Sure
this
thing.
goes, as this moves forward. I would suggest that. There's an opportunity here, and we've talked about this particularly at the Rio small area plan, to think about putting commercial on the first floor and then putting apartments or living areas on the top floor. And this would seem to me that this would be sort of an interesting opportunity or an interesting place to sort of use that plan, because it would reflect what we're doing down there at Rio and 29, and this is actually a good place to do that. So I'm expressing my I guess just my disappointment that it's not something. And I know, Ben, that's not for you, but I can express it because I see the applicants looking at me with that look. I'm expressing my disappointment that that kind of model was not used here, because there's another thing I'm going to ask about. In their plan, they say they're asking for an exemption to the height, to the setback on the height, because they want this to be 4 stories, but we're not voting on that tonight. So I don't know if we just sort of missed it or how we're going to deal with that, but I'm certainly not having been briefed by you. I'm not feeling inclined to sort of deal with that exception, which is on their plan.
Mr. Bivens, are you looking at materials from the original proposal? Where did you get the height?
I'm looking at the materials that were in the Planning Commission box when I picked them up yesterday.
Okay. The application originally
this is
was proposed for a height that was above the limit for that area, and they have since revised the application, and they are now meeting the height requirement, which off the top of my head, I believe was 65 feet maybe.
So you're saying on sheet 2 that was done, I can't see this thing anymore in my eyes, on 2/10/22, I guess that's the last revision date, February 10th, 22, where it says building heights on the left-hand side.
I'd have to pull up that document if you give me a moment. I don't know if that language was left over from the original proposal, but they are currently in alignment with the zoning ordinance for that area.
Oh, is it going to be
for the PRD?
Okay.
Excuse me, they're in alignment with the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance requirements for planned residential.
I'll let you pull that up, but all I'm saying is that a special exception request is being processed with this PRD to remove the requirements of the setback for buildings over 3 stories in height as permitted by the Albemarle County zoning ordinance.
I've found that note on the application plan, and the applicant may speak to that further when they get to their presentation, but special exceptions can be processed with the site plan as well. So we don't have that teed up for you this evening as far as the special exception. So they'll either need to meet the ordinance requirements or seek that special exception at site plan.
And so Rebecca, that's outside of us then. That's outside of the commission.
Typically it is, yes, if staff doesn't have any issues with it. But it's at 3 stories or 45 feet when a step back is required.
Right. And they're saying that they're looking at 65 feet. Now, I'm putting it out there. Thank you for that. That's helpful. But I also, I guess that's another pin that perhaps the applicant will speak to when it's their turn, Chair.
Yes, I'm sure that they've been looking at the records and they can bring that up when they respond to us. But well spotted, as they say. Are there other comments or questions for staff on this application? Oh, I'm sorry, Luis.
Yeah, so I had picked up that note as well that Commissioner Bivens raised, and we've dealt with these special exceptions before in other projects. So I'm just wondering why this is not being raised, or why is it viewed as not a issue for the commission?
So was
Do we have Ben? Yeah, go ahead.
Was the question why staff did not raise this as an issue to be addressed by the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Correct. So we vote, right.
Yeah, I apologize. That should have been noted as something that would be a component of the application.
Okay.
We require a separate application and fee for special exceptions. In your motion or your comments on this item, you can request that special exception come to you at that time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they have in the past. So I think that's where the confusion is coming in, is why this height.
Yeah, and I understand that it's there are if you look at, I'm sure you've seen on the board agenda where there are a number of special exceptions that don't come to the Planning Commission, and we've discussed this before. If this is one you'd like to see, we can get your comments on it possibly. But I think it hasn't been officially requested, and that's, like Ben said, perhaps a carryover note left during the review process. It needs to be cleaned up before the board, maybe.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Ms. Ragsdale, are you saying, can you come back for a sec? Are you saying that they are not asking for going to be asking for a special exception in the future?
What I think what she's trying to say is that the applicant will need to clarify if that indeed is a special exception that they will be issuing for this application. What I was trying to clarify earlier was that they had originally proposed the buildings to be taller, and they have reduced the height of the building to be in compliance with the comp plan and the zoning ordinance. I had not seen that note about the step backs.
Okay, so that's to be resolved. All right. Other questions for the staff before we hear from the applicant? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so may we have the applicant's presentation, please.
Good evening, everyone, commissioners, chair, and staff. It's great to see you all this evening, and thank you for considering the Maplewood item tonight. Thank you to Mr. Holt for his presentation to give you some good background material on our project. My name's Ashley Davies, and I'm with Riverbend Development, and tonight I'm joined by Alan Taylor of Riverbend and Scott Collins, our engineer on this project. I don't have a very formal presentation. I wanted to just kind of run through the project and some of the items that have come up so far, and basically open it for a discussion. But like I said, we're very happy to be before you tonight. We're very excited about this project. And I think just to give you some insight, Mr. Bivens, I really appreciate your comments and questions about the project. Just to give you some insight on our thinking in this project, we do own a lot of commercial properties in the city and have done a bunch of commercial development in the past. And as you know, a lot of commercial activity is really faltering at this time. So we're kind of well aware of and well versed in that environment. But as we were looking at the Hollymead Community Center area of the comprehensive plan, it really is, it's not just this 3.4 acre parcel. It's a much larger area and tapestry of uses. And when you look at that overall center, every single other acre of land is all commercial uses that I would argue are quite underutilized. And, I hope that someday they will redevelop as well. This, as you know, is a vacant parcel at the corner of Worth and Profit. But, we really feel like the housing component here is part of that larger picture. When you think of the comprehensive plan, and in particular, the planned residential zoning, that it's not just trying to cram every single goal of the comprehensive plan into 1 3-acre parcel. It really is looking at that overall area and how all the uses lace together and function nicely. So we actually felt like this corner, given that everything around it is a variety of commercial and civic uses, that it actually is pretty nice to introduce a new housing type into the area, which staff mentioned is the 2/2 housing. I will share my screen and just kind of pull that up. Let's see if I can. Can you see that picture?
Yes, we can see the townhouse illustration.
Yes, yes. So this is an illustration of what a row of 2/2 units look like. And as you may be aware, they're named that because it looks like, you know, a stacked townhouse unit, but within each unit, there are 2 residential units inside. They are all self-parked within the building. So there are 2 garages on the back side of this. And then each unit has 2 floors of that dwelling. And so since the garages are on that first floor, it means that you get a variety of unit types. There's one unit that's around 1,500 square feet and 2 bedrooms. And then the upper unit is a 3-bedroom, about 2,500 square foot unit. And as staff also mentioned, we are providing the affordable housing component on site. So that will be kind of a 3rd layer into the variety of housing that's offered here. And, you know, so we were really looking at it as you analyze the area from like a planning perspective. You've got single family homes, you've got townhouses, you've got commercial, you've got churches, you've got kind of the outpost of Martha Jefferson there. And we were really, we're excited about adding this use type, this housing type to the area because it's kind of a newer thing. We are building these at Brook Hill now, and it's been a very popular housing type. And we think it's a great way to really, like you said, Mr. Bivens, there's not more land available in the county. And because there's no housing within this commercial center, which is supposed to be mixed use, we are adding that component. And we think it's really important to add housing types that really utilize the land in a way. We're at 30 dwelling units per acre. And I think that that's really important to note because, you know, within the comprehensive plan, you can go between 6 and 34 units per acre. And so we think it's in the best interest to go up towards those higher densities in the areas where you can. This is a nice flat vacant piece of land that is, you know, has all the transportation improvements around it. It's close to a lot of amenities. So we feel really good about the plan. As Mr. Holt said, we worked very closely with staff and really revised the entire concept to make sure that the pedestrian and other amenities were much better than we had initially outlined. So we've got this really nice, large green space for residents to utilize. And then you'll kind of see here that every single unit within the development fronts on some type of shared green space, and as well as having the 10-foot pedestrian kind of bike ped component, and then a 12-foot landscape buffer around that area. I do not have specific information on what's happening directly next door. I don't know if my other team members might have better intel on that, but I don't know the status of that property. I haven't heard any information about it changing from a commercial use, if that was the question, but I unfortunately don't know specifically what's happening over there.
Opine on that, Ash, if you want.
Sure.
Hey, this is Alan Taylor with Riverbend Development. How's everybody doing? I'll reiterate what Ashley said. Thanks for all the time and hospitality working through the kinks on this thing, and we're glad we're here. And this is not gospel, but this is just, kind of being in the mix on things and hearing what people are talking about. But what I've been told is that it was under contract and going through a permitting process for a self-storage facility to go there. And that has subsequently fallen apart because it was uncovered through, I think, pretty late in the process. I think they were pretty far down the permitting approval route, but apparently the Food Lion anchored shopping center next door had some kind of right of first refusal. And they are, the last I heard, and things changed, but the last I heard is that the Food Lion owner was invoking that refusal right and trying to move forward to acquire that in anticipation of expanding that shopping center. So, Mr. Bivens, I think that to your point, it looks like, I don't know, the question's always when, but it looks like that's what's ultimately going to happen. And I'll hand it back to Ashley.
Thank you.
Okay, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, I'm happy to open it up to questions and discussion about the project.
All right, I'll do that. So with that, I'd like to find out if there's any questions that we'd like to ask the applicant. They've answered a couple of them. I know I have some. Does anyone else have other questions?
Chair, I did forget to answer the question about our step back. Do you mind if I jump in on that?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. So these structures, as you see from our image, they are 4 stories. So they're well below that 65-foot height limit. Most of them are closer to the 50-foot mark. You've got, you do have kind of some roof patio areas there, but most of them are about at that 50-foot mark, but they are a 4-story unit and they do go straight up. And so, yes, we will need to look at that. The way the units work to get the square footage and whatnot, they do not have a step back. So we are happy to process that. However, staff and the commission would like to do so. And I apologize if we should have submitted that earlier. That was probably our oversight. You will see with all of these units, if we're thinking about a really urban environment, these are really pulled back really far from the roadways. They all, like I said, they all front on these really pretty nice green spaces. So I don't think in this case, the step back would serve any planning purpose, but I'm happy to discuss that with the group.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to Mr. Bivens.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Taylor, on that piece. That was one of my concerns because I was under the same impression as you led with, that a storage facility was in play on the 400 parcel, which was then giving me some pause about putting such a lush and large sort of green area right next to the storage units. So I'm a bit better about that. I was, because I recognize that that's while you can make those 2 uses work, that's a hard use to be right smack up against a storage unit. So I'm glad to hear about that. The other piece that sort of got to me is that on page 3 of your narrative, 1, 2, where it says a mixture of housing types and affordability, you also have triplexes in there. So I'm assuming if you are going to do triplexes, then I'm assuming that the first floor would be a 1-bedroom or a studio or something like that. And if that's accurate, that's where I started thinking about, wouldn't it be interesting to have an office, is to be able to put an office on the first floor. So you'd have sort of professional offices in buildings that you had triplexes in, and sort of group those in a way that would be useful. But I'm only hearing 2/2s, even though your narrative says triplexes. So, Chair, when we have an opportunity, I'd like some clarity on that, please. And then my only other piece, you talked to me about the CO laws, the commercial law, so I'm still sort of frowning about that. But I'm trying my best to be a good citizen about having those kinds of housing types over there. Why I'd really like to have places for those people to work if they were to go there. So that's really my thing on whether or not we're talking about having triplexes, and then what the first floor units would be. The other piece that I guess I need to just confirm for us all that we're talking about, this will be a leased property, much like your Brookfield, Brooklands is a Rolls Royce. Your Brooklands, I think is yeah, Brookfield. See, the Brookfield, one's a car and one's a project. Knowing my focus, I'm probably thinking about the cars thing. And so, is this a leased piece of property versus a purchase part? Because there's something in the narrative in that same section sort of gave me some pause of whether or not these would be flipped at some point to individuals as opposed to other corporations.
Okay, so if you go ahead and respond, they've got 2 questions.
We have looked at the site, and so what I'll say is we are purchasing the property, so there will be an overall homeowners association, and then for the way the 2/2s work, those do become condo units that can be for sale. I'm sure you've read through our affordability information, and those are offered up as for rent units for the affordability period. So they could be, the units could be for sale or for rent. You have either of those options, but you do turn the whole project into a condo. But and were you asking about Brook Hill, how that's working? Mm-hmm. So similarly, in Brook Hill, we're the kind of the master developers out there, and there are some components that have been sold for senior living. Some components have been sold to Stanley Martin to develop. Some components we are self-developing, but this is a project that we would self-develop, and then it's a condo unit, so it can be for sale or for rent.
And would you speak to whether or not there will be triplexes, or are they all going to be 2/2s?
So as you can see from this is our most recent submittal. We've analyzed it a bunch of different ways, and we think that the 2/2 unit is the best product for this particular site. So I apologize that our that sentence of the narrative probably should have been removed.
Okay, other questions? Fred.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you, Ashley. Just a couple quick questions. First of all, the calculation or your rationale behind 12 overflow parking spaces, was that basically just trying to fit it into the space you had left, or was there any kind of a rationale behind that? I'm just curious.
That might be a question for Scott. I know, with each of the units, you've got the garage space and then your own off-street parking space, but I might leave that for Scott to answer if he has any thoughts on that.
Scott, you're muted if you can hear us.
Sorry, yeah, I was muted. Thanks. I'm trying to figure out how to turn my screen on, my video on as well, but I'll start talking while I'm trying to figure that out. With these units, the way it works is they have a driveway space and a garage space for each of the units. So it allows basically the parking to be handled within the unit and the driveway, and really cuts down the amount of excess parking that you need on the site, which is what's so great about this type of unit. It allows some parking within the structure of the unit, so you don't have as many spaces. And with the overflow parking, we've just provided some additional parking around the site for any guest spaces, but the parking for the residents is within the unit footprint and the driveway.
Got it. Thanks. I was aware of that. I was just curious if there was some rationale behind the guest spaces, because I think we've seen this before. So that's a helpful clarification. Second question I have is probably also for you, Scott. It is related to stormwater management. How are you handling stormwater management, and will that potentially impact some of your green space if you have biofilters or above ground management?
Right, exactly. This site itself, being a 3-acre site, and we're trying to incorporate this green pocket park within the development. We are proposing an underground detention facility sort of below the green space that doesn't, that will keep the majority of the areas as an active recreational area and tot lot, and it's kind of a meeting area. That's what the comp plan actually called for on this site. So we were trying to incorporate that as being not only for this community, but for the other parcels around it. So we'll do underground detention, and we'll just have to do nutrient credits because it is such a small site. It's really hard to do above ground on something like this. And it's got a lot of existing easements. You can see at the top of that site, it's got this this main trunk line of the sanitary sewer that serves Forest Lakes. There's a lot of easements and power lines along Prophet Road with future expansion of the right of way. So the site really gets kind of pinched down when you start really looking at it.
No, that's helpful. So nutrient credits was the question, I guess, or the answer to the question I was looking at, because I was afraid if you were, you might find later that you have to take up a substantial amount of your open space with some sort of above ground biofilter. So good to know. Those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? I have a couple, but I just want to, Corey, go ahead.
I have a few questions, and so perhaps if it's your preference, Madam Chair, I can just ask a few and then relinquish the floor and come back later to them. My first question, and forgive me, I'll be skipping around a little bit on topics, but are these buildings equipped with elevators? I was just curious, does that play into the height piece that you guys are asking for?
They are not.
Okay. And then you mentioned the HOA piece. I know you have the private roads. Could you talk a little bit about what would be included in that? And I don't know if you can give an estimated price range, but it's always something to keep in mind. We're talking about housing affordability. And so I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about, what you foresee the HOA playing out to be and what's included?
So the HOA really includes all the maintenance of the entire site. As you know, it's not an extraordinarily large site, but any of the landscaped buildings and any of the travel ways, that sort of thing. Alan might have a better idea what the fees might be, because we have all of our projects pretty much have HOAs, whether they're kind of lower density or higher density, to make sure that everything is maintained appropriately. But I don't think it's an exorbitant amount, especially since you don't have like a big community center or anything like that incorporated here. I don't think that would greatly impact the affordability. Alan, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think Ashley's right. This is a small site, and the major amenities are the open space and the tot lots and dog park. So we have not, just to be candid, we have not done a reserve analysis and an HOA analysis on what the budget would be, but I would just guess it's going to be somewhere around $100 a month, probably. And to further clarify what Ashley was saying earlier, these could be rented, but our intent is to sell these. So they'll be for sale, and the affordable units would be then owned by somebody that qualifies for the affordability program.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to shift gears a little bit to talk more about the planning.
For once,
yeah.
may I ask, may I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
So how much did you say? I couldn't hear you. You sort of stumbled on the amount per month.
100.
I think it should be around $100. It's with the director's office, the directors and officers insurance, the D&O insurance. Just that alone is a pretty hefty expense item. And but given the amount of units and the fact it's a condo, I mean, probably it should start with a 1. I'm guessing low $100 a month. But I'm completely just shooting from the hip on that one because like I said, we've not done the total analysis on it.
Okay, Corey, you said you had some more questions?
Yeah, I do. So regarding, as I was looking at the plan, I would like to hear the applicant talk a little bit more about connections, right? I feel like there are some real missed opportunities, particularly with the PRD already, and it's purely residential, but I know there's a food line that's to the left of your plan that, doesn't seem to speak to anything there. I know there's a child care center, I believe, right across the street. Doesn't speak to anything there. I was like, your pedestrian trail kind of deads in. Is this a dead end? But I just want you to provide the opportunity to share with us, what are the thoughts about connecting to some of these commercial pieces here?
Thank you for that question. So as you might imagine, it's a little bit challenging with the way the existing commercial is set up right now. As if you've been out there, you can tell that the Walgreens, like there are retaining walls and whatnot. So I think our current primary strategy at this point is really getting, there's a couple of different levels. You've got the main bike ped improvement that should get continued as that area redevelops. I'm wondering if you're asking about like ways to cross the street there. Is that your main question? Because for the rest of it, we really have to primarily utilize the main bike ped path. And then we have obviously the sidewalks that are within our green spaces and connect into the units themselves. But we don't have, and I guess you can also see that we have an access easement that we've created. So if you see, there's the potential to connect into other parcels. So I would love to get a little bit more clarity about what you're asking, because I know we can certainly, during the site plan phase, if there's a way, a safe way to get across the street, things like that, if that's the question.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, Ms. Davies. I think the big thing to me that jumps out is the food line, is a grocery store. And my goodness, you got 100 units here potentially. I don't want to have to jump in a car to go to the grocery store. Could you talk a little bit about how that connection is made? I thought that part of the grade was relatively flat, I thought, between those two. And then across the street is the daycare as an example, but I think that should be paid attention to too. But does that clarify my question?
Yes, I'm just not certain the best way to get to I know where the food line is from here, but without having control of the other parcels, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I would definitely want to be just walking across there. I would probably just trespass across other people's property to get there. So I know exactly what you're saying, but I think the other issue is potentially, one of the things that is in the future plans by VDOT for this area, I believe, is a roundabout at Profit and Worth Crossing. So part of what we're doing here is planning for the future of that. So that will have to incorporate pedestrian components as well. But you can see on the northern side of the property here, where we're dedicating land to VDOT, and then they have the area here to do a potential roundabout. So I think there is a slight balancing act of providing the components that we've seen called out within the comprehensive plan, and also preparing for future plans by others. So if you have, ideas or suggestions, we are certainly all ears. But yeah, we're kind of working within the land that we have. So,
well, and to expand on that just a little bit, for the connection to the Food Lion Center, that was kind of the intent of that road to the northern part of the property, up in the corner in the top left, where that road is stubbed in there. I think the intent there, and we'd be happy to, if it's not part of the application, we'd be happy to provide an easement so that when that land that used to be the storage parcel site, which is directly to the left that you can see in there, it's owned by Jazan LLC. So that connection could be made pretty easily when that road was extended and that property was developed, especially if it was developed by the guy that owns the Food Lion Center, that all of those things would be connected and it'd be nicely walkable.
Yeah. And you can see that easement called out here that kind of contemplates starting to connect all those components.
Thank you for sharing. I think your proposal would be much stronger if you guys really, or if your team, I should say you guys, if your team would put some additional exploration as to how do we make connections where it makes sense to these things that are around, right? You have the grocery store, the childcare, and I'm sure there's other things. And speaking from memory, I'll ask one more, that I relinquish the floor, Madam Chair. I have more questions for later. I looked and I was a little surprised to see that there was nothing to address the schools and the amount of students that you'll be putting into overpopulated schools that are already. If you talk a little bit about how you might mitigate some of those impacts.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as you may be aware, we've already discussed it tonight. We are the developers of the Brook Hill property, and within both Brook Hill and we're not the North Point developers, but within Brook Hill, part of that rezoning is a new elementary school site for this area. And then we also proffered, I think it's about a 65-acre high school site to Albemarle County as part of that rezoning several years ago. There's also a new elementary school site located in the North Point rezoning, which is just north of here. So you've got brand new sites proffered both north and south of here that the county and we are working on together. So, we feel like that is the solution to the current overcrowding issue.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Madam Chair, I'll relinquish the floor. I have more questions for later.
Okay, well, you already stole my connectivity question. Does anyone else have questions? If not, we can go back to Mr. Claiborne. Okay, why don't you continue? Corey.
Oh, sure, thank you. Could you talk a little bit more about the number of units, right? I think in the report I read up to about 100. And, that's easy to kind of visualize, if you will, with the just random squares that were placed in one plan I saw. This one seems to, I try to count them up on your screen. So there's maybe 36, and then there's 2 over 2, right? So maybe that's 72. Could you talk a little bit more about where you're really trying to go, where you think you're going to land, right? In terms of the number of units there? What should we be paying attention to?
So this gives you a really honed in, this illustrative plan gives you a really honed in version of what's possible here, because as Scott mentioned on this site, and you can see some of the dotted lines representing them, but really the rest of this site is in a variety of easements that we can't do anything to change those. So this shows you really what the buildable area is, and combined with the parks and open spaces that we need to provide to make this a really nice community. So what you're seeing here, so each of these boxes, you can kind of see the garage outlines in the back. So each one of these boxes represents 2 units. So this is really the reality of what we would bring in a site plan for this site. Maybe with, obviously we will look into any additional pedestrian connections that we could make, given, working with VDOT on that component as well. So, but this is it, what you're looking at here.
Okay, so this is probably the more realistic one. Okay. And then last, I think this is probably my final question. It's, I've said this quite a few times. It's very difficult to kind of throw your support behind something when you can't visualize it, particularly in the vertical sense. And so, we have all these plans futuristically to talk about sustainability and climate action. And if this is kind of what you're thinking in terms of concept, I'm not sure if this is a textbook image or kind of where you're thinking of heading to, right? But could you talk a little bit about, materials, when you think about durability or sustainability? Walk us through what you're going there, what you're trying to do. And I ask that question because buildings they're really important, right? Once you put it here, it's going to be here in 50 years. And right now, I just have a bunch of rectangles on paper, which is really hard to get behind. So walk me through. And I understand it's just a concept, but is this kind of what you're thinking?
So the image you see on the screen is the 2/2 units that we're building right now. And I think for any of you, we would love for you to come and visit Brook Hill and see what's already gone up there on the ground. But you can see, it's really high quality materials, a lot of brick involved and, some hardy plank type materials, but yeah, they're really high quality, built to last units. So we think they're quite handsome and will be a nice addition to that area. I hope everyone can see the image on the screen right now, which gives you an idea of what we're building.
Could you talk anything about sustainability goals that you might have been talking about at a conceptual level? Understanding, and this is very early, but usually those conversations are happening now. And, we have climate action goals and things like that for the county. We'd just love to hear a little bit about how this proposal will help us achieve our vision.
I have to toss that one to Alan.
Everybody, I anticipated that. Thank you, Ash. I think, the main thing with this one is I think it's just we're trying to create, and if you haven't been out to one of these 2/2 buildings yet, like the Brook Hill ones, I think are really nice. I mean, they've got rooftop decks. They're large units. I mean, they're cool. And I think the main thing from a sustainability is that this is a very efficient and nice way to development area land in a way that it's going to be used and maximized and not have sprawling, developments that chew up a lot of land in a land consumptive development pattern while promoting home ownership. It's great to throw apartments up there and provide affordable ways for people to utilize growth area land. I mean, one of the central tenets that we try to, put in place at Riverbend is we try to, develop in the development area and place conservation easements in the rural area, which is, try to embrace the county's initiative to do it that way, and to try to use development area land in a way that is, sustainable for the future is to try to, implement, I think, 2 big things, which in this one is home ownership and then efficient use of growth area land and not develop it, in a by right manner. I guess those are the 2 headline things that I can think of right off the cuff. And I'm sure that we can figure out some more ways to, talk about the sustainability. But I mean, it's a really good question. That whole thing is close to our hearts at Riverbend. I mean, we are a sister company of ours is Sun Tribe Solar, which, does utility scale solar installations and also solar installations on top of rooftops. So green energy is really important. We're also the developers of the Apex building downtown, which is, powered half off grid with solar power. 55% of that building is powered with solar. So, I mean, it's not something that, is missed by us, that sustainability is an issue, for everybody going forward. And so we've tried to embrace it. I think the two headlines for this one are about the development area and efficient use of that land, and not trying to create, by right, sprawling rural developments everywhere by providing some optionality.
I would just add that I think when you're able to develop at these higher densities, I mean, we're almost at the highest density that the county allows within their comprehensive plan. That's the only way you can get to having a transportation network that provides alternatives as well to get people out of their cars. So I think that's helpful within the development area as well.
Okay, so with that, do the commissioners have any more questions for the applicant before we open up to the public hearing? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead. Carolyn, do we have anyone signed up to comment or on this application from the public?
No, ma'am, nobody has their hand up at this time.
Okay, we just need to make sure we gave that chance, and we'll close the public hearing and return to the commissioners. If the applicant would like to make one more quick statement, we'll entertain that, but then we want to go to our own discussion.
Sure. I just want to thank everyone for your time tonight. I really appreciate all of the comments and questions. I think they're very well taken. And I think that especially the pedestrian connection question, I would definitely like to pick that apart some more. But yeah, we do feel like this is actually a really great use for this site and provides a new, really handsome and efficient housing type that is well suited in this area. It doesn't exist in this community center, and I think it'll work really well with both the existing uses that are all around it. It's a lot of opportunities there, and the future redevelopment. I think that the commercial area is really underutilized right there. So I do see that redeveloping as the future and making this even better. So we really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to close this portion of back and forth with the applicant if you can. And I'm sorry, Luis, I saw your hand move at the last minute. Did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
No, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. I thought you were opening up to the commissioners too.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. All right. Now I recognize you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the issues that we're grappling here with, and Commissioner Bivens brought it up, is that doing away with the commercial part of this site, and in their application there is no commercial being brought back. I was certainly the comments by the applicant that this is a tapestry. I think it's very appropriate in the sense that we look at things, unfortunately, one parcel at a time, and not often do we get a broader perspective of what's around and how this is part of a larger community. And so from that standpoint, I'm not as worried about not having commercial in this property because of everything else. So I do agree with the applicant's comments. I also agree with the comments on connectivity that commissioners have raised. And to that end, I would offer back to the tapestries are woven together, and we should think about how we weave this parcel into the rest of that community. I think that's where this application falls short. It's been said, but there is no connectivity. It is not weaving or trying to weave into the commercial properties around it and recognizing the amenities that are there, has been brought up by other commissioners. And so I don't see the connections to the street even. How do we acknowledge that in terms of the sidewalks and extension of sidewalks and even getting through the sites into other areas? So I do think there's a lot that can be done in terms of, and again, the metaphor was used by the applicant, and I would encourage them to take that metaphor to heart and think about a tapestry and how you weave it together into a broader community.
And thank you for making that comment again, because that really struck me about this development as well, that it just felt like it was a rectangle island and it didn't relate to the adjacent land uses. I also just want to make a really quick comment that we had a question from Commissioner Claiborne about sustainability. And I feel like the answer that we got was that it's sustainable because it's infill, which, you know, is meeting our policy to reduce sprawl in the rural area by infilling, and we have an underutilized parcel. It's certainly doing that. But I didn't see anything particularly that I would check the box for sustainability beyond that. So for example, they said that they were going to be doing stormwater storage underneath the open area, which is great. They're not wasting land, but they're buying offsite nutrient credits, meaning they won't be attenuating any of the nutrient pollution on the site from land runoff. And you know, I look at this, if I was going to be promoting myself as a sustainable developer, in this case, I might be doing things like permeable parking spaces. Perhaps this could be the first flagship building with a green rooftop that people could actually have some, and you can actually recreate and sit on green rooftops. So the other thing I also want to point out really quickly is that just to be really clear, they kept referencing Brook Hill and that it's going to be like that. And I have seen those townhouses, but this illustration was not proffered. This illustration is illustrative only. It has absolutely no legal bearing. So we need to just keep that in mind when you are making your motions or your votes, that you are not actually voting to adopt. There's no building materials. They talked about brick tonight, but that's not in the application. So none of that can be assumed by us. All we can assume is rectangles that are perhaps 2/2. Julian brought up the point of the triplexes reference that is now alluded to be a mistake and will be clarified. But I just want to be clear that it was a beautiful picture, but it isn't necessarily any reality. And this is partly on the county because we don't actually require that level of detail at this level of application. However, I'll just say this, you know, and I think I speak for many, if not all of us, is that we prefer that people do go a bit farther and show us what they actually intend to do, because it's a lot easier to support something if we know precisely what we're supporting. And I do know that staff will be working on this matter of what's included and expected in application plans down the road, that we will be tightening that up and asking for more from applicants so that when we vote, we actually know just what it is we're getting. So sorry for that sort of soapbox speech, but I too we just talked about buses, and I don't see anything about a bus stop or, you know, anything bike racks. I mean, it's just, I don't know that some of these simple elements for transportation could have also been included. So commissioners, what's your pleasure? Where are you at with this particular application this evening? Ms. Moore?
Can we go back to the height thing and the I guess a special exception for the step back? I heard the discussion, and I'm still, you know, I don't want to ask for us to have some sort of say in something that's not our business, but I thought that was our business. And I thought that we've had other applications where that's been pointed out to us. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that we didn't take action on that specific type of request, but I thought we did in other times where that was a request that was made. So I guess I just wanted to put it back out there that, you know, I certainly support what other people think about asking for that, but it sounds like what Rebecca was saying was that is not something that would be a matter before us, but we could say that we would like to have a say in that. So is that correct, Rebecca?
Well, like I said, oftentimes we'll identify and flag these issues during the legislative process, and you will review and comment on them and make your recommendation to the board. But oftentimes it comes up during a site plan review process. So really, as you pointed out, this plan does allow some flexibility for the applicant in terms of if the unit type changes, the general parameters are they're going to meet the height requirement. As of now, they'll be required to do the step back unless they officially submit the special exception request. I think you've seen the 2/2 proposal, and I think that Ms. Davies pointed out that some thinking behind not doing a step back in this case. So you can certainly comment on that illustration that's before you, but it's not proffered, and should something change, either, they may meet the ordinance or, they'll submit the special exception request. I don't know if they intend to do that before the board meeting or not. So the ordinance allows the board to ask for planning commission feedback. Typically things are packaged together, but in this case, they're just not at this point in the review. So it is a little open-ended.
Okay, thank you. I guess it did, it jumped out at me a little bit. I didn't catch what Julian pointed out. So I thought, I guess I just wanted to lift it back up again, because it seemed like that was something that in the narrative, my understanding was that potentially they were too tall and that got sorted out, but yet it still doesn't feel completely sorted to me. And I'm not saying it's like a deal breaker for me. It's just an interesting point that I don't really want to lose sight of in the bigger picture. Thanks.
Sure, and I think that was worth bringing up, certainly because it came up earlier. And I'll just make a quick comment on that I'm fairly certain that if they were to try to step back that top story, they would lose a bedroom out of the unit, and it would make that product not as attractive and perhaps not desired to be built. And the other element of that is the step back is intended usually to reduce the sort of cavernous effect you can have from too many tall buildings being close together. But because they've got buffers around the site plus the green space, it's not really jammed in there like it could have been. So I'm guessing that if we ended up with that request, we probably would end up granting it. So it's still within your purview to request that step back. If it turns out to be necessary, I'm still not totally clear on whether they're actually needing this exception or not. If it's within the Plan Commission's desire, we can bring that one element back. But I'm kind of guessing how it would go if we did. That's all I'm saying. Just based on a previous conversation we had on this about another building that would have had to step back, and it had a lot of land in front of it that kind of seemed like it didn't need to be done to meet the intention of the step back. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, were you going to add something? Your camera came back on.
No, I was just going to say that you pointed out the example of a case recently where they ended up not even needing the step back based on some changes they made between the board and the commission. But it sounds like my sense is that everyone is okay with what they're seeing without a step back. So you can include that as a comment, and the board could take that into consideration if they do submit the special exception before the board meeting. And we'll keep an eye on this in the future, so it's not left as open-ended as we bring these things to you. But like I said, the ordinance does allow, and this is set up for some flexibility on the applicant's part.
Okay. Julian? Oh, sorry. You're done. You don't have any more questions. Okay, Luis?
Yes. So I think that's part of the issue here, Rebecca. And I mean, I would propose that we don't know what we're seeing, because what's been presented is not part of the application. It's an illustrative, but it doesn't actually have to be like that. And we don't really have an amassing to I mean, there are a couple of buildings by roads that they're in fairly close proximity. So if you have 50, 55, 60 story or 60-foot buildings there, maybe it is kind of cavernous. I don't know. We're not given the opportunity to really take a look at that. And since that is required, or the setbacks are required, or we need a special exception, I don't believe we have enough information. So certainly if we don't bring it back to the Board of Supervisors, then I would suggest that there's more material that is more illustrative and actually depicting the buildings and the massing of buildings and the layouts, and hopefully incorporating some of the connectivity that we've talked about today. That can go to the board. If our requirement is not to bring it back here, which my tendency right now is to ask.
I'm sorry, you cut out. You said your tendency is to ask, and then it stopped.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ask them to bring it back for that exception.
If I may, just to clarify, the building height limit on the application plan is 45 feet. So they could not go up to 65. That is a commitment on the application plan. That is clear that it would be no more than 4 stories.
40.
Well, with the building height, not to see. Okay.
So you said 45, but they just told us it's for 50.
Yes, the 4 stories. And that can be your feedback in this case if you think it should not exceed the 4 stories is where the step back comes into play. 4 stories or 45 feet. And that is, like I said, a little open-ended. If they were to go up to 65 feet, they would need the step back, and that would comply with the ordinance. If you have concerns in this case, I think pulling those together as far as what you're okay with, what recommendations you would like to see as far as commitments and limitations. It sounds like where we're headed, not to over facilitate you, but just trying to think what your options are as far as what you might want to include in your motion.
I believe it's within our purview to, we wouldn't want to do something that derailed their architecture necessarily, but it is within our purview to put a height limit on the building.
Mm-hmm. You make that recommendation.
So you could include that in the motion to make sure that it was crystal clear of just how tall this thing was going to be. Because what in your description just now, it sounded like they're 5 feet over the limit where a step back would kick in. Is that right? Did I understand that? You said it kicks in at 45 feet and they're at 50 feet.
Ben, can you help me with what the height is on those units? And that is what the note said. I have so many tabs open.
That's okay.
I'm going to pull it open as well. Just a second.
Okay. And okay, I'm back to the application plan. I can share my screen if you want. As far as that note, if everyone wants to see it up on the screen together, would that be helpful?
I mean, some people are nodding. I could just listen to you tell me, but go ahead, put it up.
Well, now I'm going to run into screen sharing.
Okay, well, just tell us and then we'll
No,
see if
I'm
we
just kidding.
Right.
Can everyone see that?
Well, if you pull the little line of our heads over to the right until we shrink. Yes.
So the note is in this section, building heights. It should be above your heads now. So that is directly from the ordinance as far as section 4, that the maximum building height for this development shall be 4 stories with the building height not to exceed 65 feet for each story that begins over 40 feet, or for each story above the 3rd story, whichever is less, the minimum step back shall be 15 feet. And then we have the problematic note about the special exception. And then Ben, or maybe Ashley, if we don't, whoever I guess can get to that information quickest. I don't know if it's 50 feet or 45 as far as where they are with those 2/2s.
You like me to answer that?
Would that be okay, Chair?
Yes, I can't see who said that. Okay,
Sorry, that is me.
Go ahead.
So yes, when you get to the 4-story units that have kind of the rooftop area, that height is about 52 feet. A lot of it you can't really see because it's kind of set back into the rooftop area. So it is kind of the 4-story with the access to the roof. So you are at about 52 feet there. And I guess another really important point about this project, I've heard a lot of commentary about being worried about what you're getting. And I did want to point out that this is an ARB review area. So it will go through that additional design review. And,
okay, so
and I think I also put in the chat that we are certainly happy to ensure that any special exception comes before this group for the 4th-story height.
But to be clear, the max height you're saying, Ms. Davies, is 52 feet.
That is, so for the designs we have right now in our zoning, it currently allows up to 65 feet, but the units that we have planned for this are 52 feet.
Okay, so we'll stop that. Thank you for coming in. So again, commissioners, we need to keep in mind that if 65 feet is the max possible, we should be considering it as if they're going to build the max because they're not proffering their design. So the fact that they intend it has no legal standing. So let's stay with it. It's at 65 feet. This property could be sold after it's rezoned, and then they can build 65 feet and not like the original design and whatnot. So, all right. Other comments about this development? And we could keep going on with this question of whether we want to see this back. I mean, I know one or two of you would like to definitely have it back for that. The applicant is actually able to come back to us for that one aspect. It almost strikes me that it's kind of hard to approve this without and say come back for that one exception, because I'm not clear if they can build this. If supposing we said no and we'd said yes to the application, but yet they can't build the structure, so they're not going to do it, because let's just say that we said no to going over the 45 feet.
So, Madam Chair, if I may perhaps offer a way to work around this. So, I mean, what's in front of us is not that. I mean, they didn't apply for that. So, what's in front of us is not the setback issue and the special exception for that. So we could potentially approve the rezoning and moving it away from the commercial, and ask that a more illustrative site plan with the massing and the heights of the proposal. So the actual proposal, because right now everything we have is not so it hasn't been reviewed by staff. And when it comes to the height of the building, the special exception, that hasn't been dealt with at the staff level or at our committee level. So I would request that comes back for approval, as it probably should, because it's a special exception to this committee. But I don't believe that stops us from, unless, and perhaps council can advise, but I don't see how that would stop us from dealing with the issue at hand today.
You could. I was just suggesting that it might might be best to actually know whether or not we would be intending to do that, because it might kill the project. You could, as part of this approval tonight, limit the height of the building. So you could go lower than the 65 feet that they're allowed to go up to and just put them at the 52 feet that they said they need. And that would take care of that concern about going to 65 feet. Fred?
I was asking a clarifying question. If I'm tracking, and I was tracking with Luis just a minute ago, I thought that was a good solution. If we approve it as is, if we approve this rezoning, is it true that we're saying per their application plan, the maximum height would be 65 feet, and they would have to, above 40 feet, start engaging with the step backs. So that's a given. So if they want to build something that's 65 feet and step it back starting at 40 feet, we would be okay with that collectively. I'm saying that that would be something that we would be okay with. We'd be signaling we'd be okay with it if we approve the rezoning. And so what I guess, I don't know if I'm struggling with it, but I would feel comfortable doing that. And then if they come back, and then they have to come back with the more detail that Commissioner Carazana suggested, I would support that as a good compromise, a way to keep them moving and a way for us to be able to focus on the detail that's appropriate. While I have the mic, all of the other comments I'm in keeping with, I'm in agreement with. There was really, I don't want to just talk to hear myself talk. Everything else that's been said, I'm in agreement with.
Okay, thank you. And that's also helpful to know. So, certainly, yes, we can move it forward and have it come back. I just wanted to point out again that I think what was originally intended was that it would go to staff and they would review it, and then the board would be the ones to vote on the special exception. So, it doesn't have to come back to us at all. Just to remind you, I have no problem with it coming back for you to have that extra review, if that's the wish of the commission. That could even be included as part of a motion. So, Corey.
Madam Chair, I think I would like to see it come back with, Commissioner Carazana. I just don't think there's enough information there. I don't know. I think we would like to see it back. At least I would like to see it back in the context of what's around it. We know nothing about verticality or connectivity or anything like that. And so to me, it sounds like a good idea to bring that piece back.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't hear anyone else strongly objecting to that notion. So I was going to see if there was someone willing to make a motion. Julian started moving his finger and then he disappeared. Oh, there he is.
He disappeared. Yeah, disappeared under the arm. So let's sort of separate two things out and sort of listen a bit for what there's sort of, I think, two complementary pieces here. I only picked up on the exception piece because I didn't see that in the staff's report. Okay. In the staff's report and what's being sent before us, there's no exception. They've got to follow the zoning ordinance the way Albemarle County has it set out.
Right.
And that's what my expectation is. They're going to do that because it's not in there. So what I was doing was trying to say when I brought that up, I was trying to lift up the fact that either is this really what they want to do and it was just left out, or is this what they want to? Is this not what they want to do? And it's sort of it's an editor's mistake. Okay. Right now, it's an editor's mistake because what's before us is the zoning amendment that sets forth that whatever they build there, they've got to stay within the confines of the zoning of the zoning ordinance.
Right.
If they decide not to do that, there's two other outs. There's with the Board of Supervisors, and then I guess is with the ARB. What I would be comfortable with is going with what Fred suggested, that we vote on this to send this forward with, and clearly our supervisors will have read that we wrestled with the fact, and perhaps this is a signal that Charles can say to staff, if there's a special exception, make sure it comes before us from now on, so that we don't have to spend or take it, or make sure the applicant does not have that editor's mistake on the plan when they send it to us. So one thing or the other. But right now, I'm not voting on an exception because there isn't one there. There's not anything before us because staff didn't put it before us. I'm not willing to move it so that it does come before us because I don't want to invest that kind of mistake with the commission's power. But we have sent, in my mind, we've sent a strong signal to the applicants, to staff, and to the supervisors that this is something that they need to be aware of. But right now, it's got to be built in the way that our ordinance says it's got to be built.
Right. You're exactly. I mean, they're not asking to have an exception at this point. Andy, Mr. Harris?
And on a somewhat related note, we are bound by what the applicant has put before us this evening, bound to consider what the applicant has put before us. That doesn't necessarily mean that the commission has to recommend approval, but there has to be a recommendation, whether it be approval or denial, unless the applicant requests a deferral. So I don't think that the commission is in a position to say, we refuse to act on this until we receive more information. The applicant might hear that and ask for a deferral, but unless and until the applicant asks for a deferral, I think the commission has to consider it, either approval or disapproval, and make a recommendation this evening.
All right. So with that, is someone prepared to make a motion? Corey?
I guess I would be the one making the motion since it's out of my district. I do have one more question. Maybe this is for council. I think you guys have made a great point. A lot of the images we've seen tonight really have nothing to do with, from a legal standpoint, what's really before us. Is there a way to, is it acceptable to say that, hey, we've seen these images in a sense, we want to tie at least a level of quality back to that in our recommendation, or is that pretty much off limits?
I think that the commission can make a conditional recommendation. It can recommend approval provided that the following conditions are met. No such thing as a conditional, proffers are conditional rezoning. So I think we need to be careful not to say we're approving this rezoning or we're recommending approval of this rezoning with certain conditions. But I do think it would be within the Planning Commission's ability to say, our recommendation for approval is conditioned on certain items being met.
So therein lies your challenge to some degree, because you're talking about architectural. You would literally have to sit down and come up with all the parameters.
Yeah,
it's pretty hard to say a motion like similar to the drawings that we saw, and they didn't proffer them.
All right. That was the reason for my question. I guess, are we in a spot, I don't want to take the floor, Madam Chair. Are we in a spot where it sounds like there is approval with the exception of the connectivity piece? That would be the recommendation. We see the connectivity to the commercial areas. Is that?
Yeah, you could certainly say, we approve the application as submitted, but we also request the applicant add connectivity, yada, yada, whatever else you want to add before it goes to the board.
Okay.
Mr. Missel.
So just a question related to that from an applicant standpoint, is there a way they can control connectivity to parcels adjacent to them that they don't own? I'm wondering how much of a burden we can place on them to prove any kind of connectivity other than to take the paths and the roadways and provide easements, which I think they've done.
They can't, to answer your question, no, they can't like show a pathway going across the prior storage lot. But they could more clearly say on their plan, this is the stub that's intended to connect to the other parcel, and they could put in their narrative that they plan to work with the next owner of that site to try to work through some connectivity. They could talk about how you're going to get to the Wegmans, whether it's a staircase or a hot air balloon or whatever they can come up with, whether they want to throw in a bus stop, so they could at least indicate it. They may have very well had that all in mind and just simply neglected to say much about it, which is why they got the reaction from us that they did.
So they just have to essentially explain their intent on the plan is what you're saying.
Right, and call it out.
Really, it's conceptual, but right, okay. Got it.
Okay.
If I may, Chair Firehawk, it sounds like a lot of the concerns that have been expressed, we don't exactly have solutions for at this time. We've seen example imagery, we've heard ideas, but it seems hard to kind of conceptualize that as we don't really know what the solution is. So I just kind of want to bring that back. That's kind of what I'm hearing from a lot of commissioners' comments. There are concerns and there's connectivity that we want to see. There's kind of building massing that we want to see. There's things that we want to see, but we don't really have any idea as to what that might be at this time, what that building height is, how those step backs play into it, how the connections to adjacent properties are. So I guess I would caution us, it's very open-ended at this time to know what that's going to turn out to be. That could be a variety of things that we don't really have that clarity right now.
Yeah, and thank you, Charles. And so that really sums up where I am with this. I just find it to be an incomplete proposal here, and so there's a lot of questions the applicant, but they're not in their submittal. Even the height is not there. There's no verticality. There's actually, nothing to say that it's actually 52 feet. Other than they're stating them, and I'll take them at their word, but there's just nothing there. So to me, there's a lot missing here, and that's the challenge that's what I'm really struggling with. I'm not opposed to the rezoning, but I guess that's the problem that I'm struggling with.
Well, it's certainly within everyone's purview to say that I don't have enough information to tilt me towards favorability. That, we all think that residential seems appropriate. We've talked about the sort of tapestry of uses across the landscape, and that while the development itself is not mixed use, there's plenty of businesses that you could walk to from there. Fred, you had your hand up, I think, unless I was something flashed. Was that right?
It was Corey.
That was Corey, sorry. I just saw some movement in my screen. Go ahead.
I think my colleague, Commissioner Carazana, summed up my feelings, carbon copy. So I'm going to make a motion, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair, and then we can see what happens from there. But my motion, I guess it's not one pulled up, but could someone pull up a motion?
Ben, could you pull up the motions from your staff report and just put them on the screen?
Yes, one moment, one moment, please.
I know you love pulling up the screen. It's
so good. It's a bit smoother this time. All right, here. Let me get to the last slide. Okay. All right, can you all read that?
No, I don't see anything. But if it's too problematic, I can go ahead and take a.
We aren't seeing your screen, Ben.
It's not showing. Okay, hang on one second. Let me try turning off my monitor.
I think I can do it, actually. I think I can do it. I'm okay.
I can read the language out for you, Corey, if you can't see my screen.
It was the ZMA, the numeric sequence, but I found it on my agenda, so I'm okay. So,
okay, very good.
Before you go forward, I did have a note from the applicant in the chat that they would like to request a deferral.
Yeah, I was going to point that out if nobody else saw it.
Yeah, so it's certain. I don't know what you're going to motion, Corey, but we don't have to accept the request for deferral. That's within our preview to continue on. But I just wanted you to have that information.
If you're asking me how to proceed, I would say I would accept the deferral.
Okay, so if that seems like something that, like I said, I don't know what you were about to motion originally, but you would then need to make a motion to defer.
Okay.
If that's in your pleasure. It seems like a lot of desire for more information to make a good decision. Mr. Herrick, you wanted to say something now.
We probably should clarify, if the commission is inclined to defer, we probably should clarify whether it's to a date specific. If we were to defer to a date specific, there would not be a need to re-advertise.
Okay, so for that to be answered, we'd have to ask Mr. Rapp if he could take a look at his crystal ball of scheduling to see whether or not you see an opening that we could defer to.
Well, and we might like to clarify with the applicant whether for how long they would like to defer, so that we can clarify the applicant's intent in terms of the length of this deferral.
Okay. Ms. Davies, could you actually let us know what period of time you were looking at to make the changes that you feel are important for our deliberations?
Well, given the comments that you all have, it seems like in general, you're happy with the product type and everything that we're proposing. So I think we could really easily just fold in some additional detail into the application plan to give you a better idea of, the unit quality and height and the connectivity notes that you mentioned in, just a few days, and get that back to staff for processing. So we'd love to get on as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Okay, so that gal tells us you don't need a whole lot of time. So Charles, are you able to find a date that we could defer to, a date certain?
I would ask at least 90 days so that we have time to accept whatever's submitted and review it, prepare it, and schedule everything, advertise public hearings, et cetera.
Well, I think Mr. Herrick was saying if we deferred to a date certain, we wouldn't have to advertise, but I understand staff would still need to do some more review.
Yeah, I'm looking at our schedule.
Sure, understood. We don't want to cause a planning emergency.
I would say May 24th.
All right, Ms. Davies has her hand up. I don't know if that's from earlier, or is that deferral too long for you to be
Well,
interested?
we are under contract for the property. So the longer that we defer is problematic for that contract. So I don't want to put it before you tonight for anything bad to happen to this project. I think you've seen from our presentation what our intent is, and we would not be, I don't know if there's a better way to handle it. We're certainly willing to add those components that give people, assurities of our direction, and the knowledge that this also requires the ARB review. We're very intent on moving forward with the project. So I just bring that up because I don't want to jeopardize the ability to move forward with the contract on the property. So I'm sorry if that places any kinks into the consideration, but we certainly have good intent here, and what we have put before you meets all the zoning that we're requesting, but we do have additional information that provides, I guess, added comfort in the review process. But we also have that ARB component that will handle that specific review piece. So sorry, I feel like I've just confused the conversation, but that's
what I'm hearing.
So thank you.
Yeah, I hear your good intentions, but what I'm also hearing is that May 24th is too long for you. It would mess up your purchase contract. And so that is not acceptable for a deferral for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead to Mr. Missel, who's raising his hand below.
So I think I could still call myself the new guy and ask new guy questions, but I'm wondering if, I know on the ARB, there were times when we were generally supportive of an application and there were some clarifying items that would have been helpful, and the applicant chose to defer. We opted to not have the benefit of staff review, which helped to streamline the process for the applicant. I don't know if that's precedent on the part of the Planning Commission or not. But I just throw that out there as, since these are sort of additional information, additional clarifying elements, would that be a possibility to help streamline things?
I feel like only staff can answer that. I have no idea about.
No, I mean, we have very full dates for the next 2 months, multiple public hearings each night that the PC is going to be acting. So we just don't have an open date until May 24th.
Got it.
And where we are.
Thanks.
Okay, so the applicant is not able to defer till May 24th. So we either need to vote this up or down. That's what I've gotten from this conversation.
Okay, if that's the case, I'm willing to make my motion.
Mr. Claiborne, before you make a motion, Ashley Davies has her hand up if you would like to give her a chance to speak one more time.
Madam Chair?
She was just asking if this would require another public hearing, and the answer is that it would. So that's the challenge. All right. Mr. Claiborne, back to you.
Okay. Mr. Holt, do you mind pulling up your motion one more time for me?
All right, is it visible?
Yes, sir. That's perfect.
All right, very good.
So my motion would be move that the Planning Commission recommend denial of ZMA 2021-00006 Maplewood for the reasons that we have discussed, which include lack of connectivity, lack of massing, lack of what else was out there? There was building. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
I would say clarity on the building height, Commissioner Claiborne.
Okay, clarity on building height. So thank you. I was looking at my notes. So that would be my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Carazana. Discussion. Where are people falling? Are you all pretty much feeling that you are in support of this denial because it doesn't, for all the reasons that Corey just stated and what we just discussed? Julian?
Chair, I will, even though I understand the fullness of the discussions, I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay, Mr. Missel. Thank you. Thank you, Julian.
I agree that the discussions have all been valid. I think there are other alternative ways to get this information other than denying the motion. I feel like we would be able to get that if we did approve the motion and then follow up with additional building height requirements as part of a possible waiver request, and that there would be other alternative ways to get that detail, including connectivity. So I would not support the denial.
Okay, and if I may, I would have to say I concur with you on that, because I think that we can tell them that they need to include this for the Board of Supervisors. And I know that it's not, we have to believe them to a certain level, but we could make a strong signal to the board that we expect this information to be provided. And if it's not, we would not think it was a favorable application. So I think we can forward that as part of our motion, should we decide to vote for approval. So, so far there's three sort of not supporting the denial and two supporting it. I haven't heard from you, Ms. Moore.
I don't support the denial for the same reasons that you all have discussed. I think there's opportunities there to fix the things that we've discussed.
Okay, well, and a motion has been made and seconded. It's been discussed. So I think we have to call the question.
All right. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
No.
Mr. Missile,
No.
Mr. Bivens,
No.
Ms. Moore,
No.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Okay. So the motion fails by a vote of 4-2. All right. So we're back to the drawing board. Sounds like some people would like to support this application. Is there someone who has a motion crafted in support?
Well, so Ms. Chair, I believe what you stated during our conversation here before you called the question. You know, I do agree that there may be a path forward. I just haven't heard it yet. But I think what you articulated got. If we signal that there are specific elements that are missing, that this is an incomplete application. And if when they take it to the board, they include massing, building heights, more detail on not an illustrative, but what are they proposing? And that is taken to the board with the special exception of not having a setback because they have a design that they can show, an actual design in the proposal that can be reviewed by staff, and all the elements are reviewed by staff, then, you know, I believe that that's a path forward, that we signal that to the board and that this is incomplete and that those elements will need to be included for the board's review.
Yes, and we have done that in the past. We have had things that we wanted the applicant to have taken care of before it goes to the board, and we've stated what those were. And then when the staff does their report, they will enumerate, you know, the planning commission said this, this, and this, and these are taken care of in this way. So that becomes part of the review. So it would not be lost, but it should be included as part of the motion. So is someone prepared to make a motion for approval? Mr. Bivens.
Oh, I move that. I move that we move forward ZMA 2021-06 Maplewood, and that we include and that we ask staff to include a note listing out the conversation that we had about massing, about connectivity, and about sort of height, the building height, and that be that they engage with the applicant to prepare the proposal for the Board of Supervisors, adding that to the document that they have tonight, and that the board understand that the commission felt that these were important issues that they should consider as they look at this particular project.
Okay, there's a second by Ms. Moore. Can I ask, and we'll have discussion, can I ask council, was that specific enough for a motion?
Yes, that suffices in that it addressed either a recommendation for approval or denial of the application, and then the additional recommendations of the planning commission are fine on top of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we've got it right. All right. Just any further discussion on this proposal? Okay, let's call the question. Carolyn? I don't know what's happened to staff.
Mr. Carazana,
Did we lose them all?
Oh, here she comes. Mr. Claiborne.
No.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Yes.
and Mr. Carazana.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries 5 yeses and 1 no. This moves now on to the Board of Supervisors. And I want to thank the applicant for their patience as we tried to wrestle through this application. I think that you're well aware of the type of information we like to see and the level of detail that we require to be able to know exactly what it is we're voting for. So I trust staff will do their due diligence in making sure that these items are addressed before it goes to the board. And I'm sure some of our board members will call us and ask us to explain that conversation. So I think we'll go through this again, I'm sure, one-on-one. So with that, I would close this whole portion, and then I would recommend we take a 5-minute break just to stretch and eat your Cheetos or whatever it is you guys do to survive these meetings. And I'll see you back at 8:15 for one last.
Pork rinds. Pork rinds.
Pork rinds, okay. I'm gonna look for a cookie.
Carbs, just protein.
All right, at least stretch.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate the time.
So Ben, while we're here, let me just walk you through how I do the PowerPoint presentation. Let me open one real quick. I'll show you what I click on.
Bill, this is being recorded?
Yes.
It's
just I'm sorry, what, Carolyn?
I mean, they don't pause it when we go to a break like this, so this is part of what will be on the video.
That's fine. I'm helping them with the presentation.
Okay.
So Ben, here's what I do. This is, I select screen 2. I share it. And then you see this icon right here that I'm hovering over.
No, I don't. Sorry.
Okay. Let me know when it shows up.
Let me find your cursor.
Okay, you see the plus and the minus bar here?
Yes. Okay, I found you.
You see the little icon that's right there? If I click that, double click it, and it goes to full screen.
All right.
And
I'll make sure I have the right screen selected. And then if that doesn't work, I can turn my monitor off.
so if you want to give it a try, just to show see how it works.
Sure thing.
And now anybody who looks at this in YouTube can see how to do it.
We're here to educate the masses, right?
That was a little trick I had to learn a while ago. Okay, there you go. And then double click that button right there.
See, the problem that I'm having is it's kicking that full screen presentation over to screen 1, even though I've selected share screen 2. Hang on, let me escape and yeah. All right, let me do stop share. Let's try that again. I'll share screen 1.
When you share screen, you can do screen 2. There you go. It's working.
Yep.
Perfect. You got it.
There it is.
Yep. Okay. You got it.
Good to go.
Yep.
And Rebecca, I saw your note about the slope.
I had to stretch my legs. do a lap around in the maze. That's the first floor.
Just a reminder, whatever we're talking about is foyable. We're on a break, so we shouldn't be talking.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Please stop.
Okay, I'm seeing 8:15. People can come back. Hopefully they didn't go too far. What does Julian's screensaver say? Attention, don't circulate under the trees? Is that what it says? Trying to translate this French
That's
sign.
exactly what it says.
Ah, très bien. Why can't we circulate under the trees? Will just be a mystery. There was an interesting, while we're waiting for people to come back, there was an interesting study done about sort of like how to get people to behave how you want them to in public spaces. And it turns out that, you know, telling people not to do things makes them want to do them more. So instead you tell them what you would like them to do instead of what you don't want them to do. Because we're all little rebels.
That's what we did with our 4 kids.
These are French people. French people will usually do what you ask them to do. Unless you're a gilet jaune. Unless you're a gilet jaune, then that's a whole different thing.
All right, let's not bash the French now.
Well,
Okay.
I know that was a good thing. They will do that unless unless you're like the same people that would storm the Bastille. We have our own group that does that kind of stuff.
That's right. I think they're on their way to DC. All right. With that, is everyone back? I just need to see your heads so that I can know we can actually start this next session. Corey's not back.
Yeah, he is. Oh, no, he's not.
It's just little square. You can't fool me.
Oh, that's good.
All right, we'll give him 1 minute. He's got little kids probably jumping on him, although it might be past their bedtime. Corey, are you there?
He's coming. He's running.
He's running.
Okay.
Come on, Corey.
Might have been out of pork rinds.
Or you gave him the craving and now he's, rushing through the house looking in the top cupboards. I think somebody gave Jenny some nice dinner while we were meeting.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw Miles.
I mean, I was like, if I could
eat. I
just get my fork through the screen.
Like, I'm gonna have to get that boy a driver's license so he can slip over here too.
Well, should we keep waiting for Corey? Another minute, but I don't want to hold us unnecessarily. Let's see, we have quorum. So let's go. All right, I'm going to reopen us back up and we're going to go to ZMA 2021-00012 Skyline Ridge Apartments. May we have the staff report?
Yes, you may. And I think I've sorted out the share screen issues. So
Don't jinx yourself.
All right, is that showing? Okay, very good. All right, so this zoning map amendment is a steep slopes overlay amendment. Location of the project is at the end of Colonnade Drive, and Colonnade intersects with Ivy Road to the north. And to the west, you have Lewis Mountain in the observatory. So the applicant is looking to amend the preserved steep slopes within the previously approved development area. There were site plans that were approved in the late 90s for this particular property. And we'll get into some details later. Current zoning is R15 residential, and the overlay districts, really the only one that's of note is the steep slopes, which includes both managed and preserved slopes. Comprehensive plan designates this area as both urban density residential, that's the orange, and that calls for a density of 6 to 34 units per acre. And then the parks and green system is the green shaded areas. And that's outdoor use areas, recreational areas, buffers, that sort of thing. So the applicant is proposing to keep the underlying R15 zoning. They do not wish to change that. They're simply trying to amend the steep slopes zoning overlay. Specifically, they want to redefine the preserved slopes as managed slopes within that project area that was approved back in the late 90s. So with your preserved slopes, it allows restricted development, and managed slopes, you retain by right zoning uses. It's also important to note that managed slopes definition includes slopes that were significantly disturbed prior to June 2012 ordinance taking effect. Here's a snapshot of the property. That pink outline shows the original area of disturbance with the previous approvals. The green is what GIS designates as steep slopes, and then that brown shading within the project area is the verified steep slope. So the applicant has done some site surveying to verify that the grade meets the criteria of steep slopes. This slide shows the proposed line of disturbance. That shaded shape in the middle of the parcel is the building envelope, the footprint area. It's essentially the same as the original site plan from a couple decades ago. And they've done some rectangular blocking to the north of the building. It shows, it demarcates the area that they would need to do additional grading within this project area. So I've highlighted in bold red that line of disturbance. The elevation there on the left side it goes up to 723 feet in elevation, and on the right hand side there's a note that says it's 716 foot elevation. So the area of disturbance would be 723 and below. So favorable factors. The slopes within the proposed project area are mainly manufactured slopes, which are created by the previous land disturbance. The request is also consistent with the county's growth management policy, which directs development to the development areas. Also, the slopes are not associated with any water features, and the slopes proposed for disturbance are fragmented below the 724-foot contour line. And the contiguous Lewis Mountain hillside system above the 700-foot contour line will remain undisturbed. Unfavorable factors. The request would disturb areas that are currently designated as parks and green systems in the comprehensive plan. I would note that these areas do coincide with what is also designated as steep slopes. The request would disturb areas designated as the mountain resource in the comprehensive plan, and that's everything over the 700-foot elevation. Also, the slopes form an aggregate area greater than 10,000 square feet, but not a close grouping of slopes greater than 10,000 square feet. Staff does recommend approval of this application. So here's the slide with the suggested motions, and specifically, let me flip to the right spot on my notes. Staff has called out the 724-foot contour as being a demarcation line that would minimize the encroachment upon the mountain resource area. So staff's recommendation is an approval for changing from preserved to managed slopes, the slopes below the 724-foot contour. So you would need to cite that specifically in your approval motion if you do agree with staff. And that's all I have for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Okay, are there questions for staff? Just waiting to see if there are any. This is for the public who may be listening. This was a site that we asked to come back to us to resolve some of the concerns around where the building was actually located, and where the slope began, and what was man-made and what was not. We've already wrestled with this one quite a bit, and tonight is more about the clarification to answer our prior questions. Maybe your questions have all been answered. Ben's like, please. No, I'm just kidding. He's ready. He knows how to share his screen in lightning speed now. Any questions or concerns or just anything for staff? If not, we'll go to the public hearing. Okay, seeing none. I want to keep beating the bushes here. Carolyn, do we have anyone signed up from the public to comment on this site?
No, there's nobody with their hand raised.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Julian is making noises at me. I did not ask the applicant to speak. Yes, we have heard from the applicant before, but we have not heard from the applicant this evening. Sorry, I think I'm getting a bit loopy at this hour. So please forgive me, Mr. Collins.
No problem on my end at all. I know it's been a long night for everybody already anyways, with this being the third item on the agenda. I don't want to go in further than you guys have already gone in. I've put everything I really want to talk about sort of in the staff report and in my application, my narratives. I'll just hit a couple highlight points. I'm going to share my screen right here that I want you to just kind of, the main things I want to kind of focus on. This was a project that was approved in around 1996. It did have a critical slope waiver request approved with it. This was sort of the disturbed area, the original disturbed areas within that property. So all the critical slopes within this red line were approved to be disturbed, and they were disturbed. The project was started construction, and then around 1997, 1998, the project stopped for reasons, market demand, costs, other items. And so the project went dormant. And the aerials that provided kind of really showed it the best. 1996, it was, a wooded area before construction. And then you can see what was started with construction and how it looked in 2000, 2002. It was starting to kind of restabilize. And then by 2010, it almost completely restabilized. But those slopes that was created during the construction is what was mapped in 2013 as preserved slopes, and they're not preserved. We've created those slopes during our construction, and we're just looking to basically come back in and continue and finish what was started in 1996 and take those slopes that are now steep slopes, and actually some are sheared slope, and kind of tie all that in with our proposed development. And I appreciate staff working with me as far as, how, as the building butts up to that mountain district, basically they gave a little bit of room to make sure we tie the building from the foundation that stops before the mountain slopes to tie in enough to take care of drainage and tie-in slopes and what have you. So we settled on the 724. The majority of it is around 710, 712. There's only two spots at the end where it got a little bit steeper. That's where the 724 came from, but majority it's like around 710, 712. So those are the main things I kind of wanted to point out and highlight. And I'm happy to talk about anything else and go into any other discussions or any other thoughts, but I think you guys talked about this before and gone through the narrative and the report. So I'm just here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you very much. And apologies again. I think those pictures were very helpful. So now, commissioners, do we have questions for the applicant? I don't see anyone. Okay. I don't see anyone with questions for you at this time. So now we can go and ask the question again. Has anyone signed up from the public to comment on this application? Carolyn?
No, ma'am, nobody has their hand raised this time either.
Okay, so with that, I'll close the public hearing and return. Does the applicant want to make another statement, or we can go back to the commission for discussion?
I'm
All
good,
right.
thank you.
All right, thanks. I'm just trying to follow the formalities properly now. All right, so commissioners, discussion. Is everyone satisfied with what they saw? Understand it? Yes, it's a remnant. Some of the slope is remnant from prior disturbance. And so it's an artificial steep slope created by the applicant that is then stabilized with vegetation and now comes under our regulatory purview, and we have to figure out what to do with it. And then so that this development can go forward. I don't think anyone had any concerns other than that. So I don't hear any discussion. People seem to not have any qualms. So with that, we can entertain a motion.
Chair, I'd be willing to make a motion on this if the gentleman who shares his screen would be willing to do that again.
Ah, you tested him. All right.
Yes, sir. I'm just adding the language to that approval motion. I'll have it right up.
Are you doing the 724-foot contour piece?
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
sir.
good. I don't have to keep my finger on that any longer. I had my finger on it thinking, oh, you said we have to include that, so let me put my finger on it. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZMA 2021-06. Nope, that's the wrong one.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
There's the Sky Ridge. No, so ZMA.
yeah, I pasted it into the wrong.
But you can leave it. I can get it. I can get it from there.
Yeah, it's Mr. Bivens. The number would just change. The last two digits need to be 1, 2.
I got it. I'm already there.
Okay.
I'm with you. But you got to make it a little bit bigger for these not youthful eyes. Thank you. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZMA 2021-00012 Skyline Ridge for the reasons stated in the staff report. Staff recommends approval. Stated in the staff report, and as staff, okay. Approval of the zoning steep slopes from preserved to managed slopes, and converting the approval of rezoning of steep slopes from preserved to managed slopes below the 724-foot contour. This recommendation, if it goes forward, would allow development within the historic area of disturbance while minimizing encroachment upon the mountain resource area.
You, is there a second? All right, Andy, Mr. Herrick was going to say something.
I'm wondering if it might be simpler just to say, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the ZMA below the 720-foot contour for the reasons stated in the staff report. I wonder if
I think that would be wonderfully suited.
A clearer way of stating, because I'm not sure that the cut and paste on the screen does it.
I move that then. That's
Do we need to
exactly what I
restate
moved.
that?
So, Mr. Bivens, would your motion be that you move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZMA 2021-00012 Skyline Ridge below the 720-foot contour for the reasons in the staff report. Would that be your motion, Mr. Bivens?
That was exactly my motion. Clairvoyant as always.
Is there a second to that exact motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Claiborne seconded. Discussion. Not seeing any, not hearing any. We'll call the question. Carolyn.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Ms. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. The motion carries. And we'll now move on to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration. With that, do we, pardon?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Collins. Thank you. Yes, and sorry for my gaffe. I guess I can't get over that. Ben and I had a slightly off night. All right, so with that, do we have any committee reports this evening? Have any committees met that you all serve on? All right, don't see any. Moving on to the review of the Board of Supervisors meeting from February 16th, 2022. Mr. Rapp, would you take it away?
Sure. Make it quick. The board approved special use permit for Caliber Collision at the corner of Rye Road and Route 29, as recommended from this board as well, with the minor changes to the front special use path, or not special use path, but shared use path and landscape strip, and also approved subdivision text amendments for the maintenance of private improvements, removing the need for maintenance agreements and putting that to a note on the plat to help clarify what is required for maintaining those and enforcement. That is all.
Okay, sorry, I'm unmuting myself. I'm being attacked by about 40 ladybugs. I mean, I can try and pay attention, but they're just dropping from the ceiling.
They came out today for some reason.
Yeah, they're all, and I'm in the third floor of the
problem.
house where they've all gone. Sorry. So that's no excuse. All right, thank you, Charles. Any old business or new business? Fred.
Just, I don't know if this is really business, but I will not be able to join next week.
Okay, thank you. All right.
We
Julie,
actually don't have anything on our work session agenda next week, so I was going to suggest that we adjourn to the March 15th meeting.
Okay,
even better.
we don't. All right. Good to know. Julian, you were making motions over there with your hand. What's
I'm
happening?
pointing to Louise. I'm pointing to Louise.
Okay, I'm sorry. Luis.
Yeah, so I guess this would be characterized as new business, but I do want, we've had a couple of submittals now that have come before us that have been less than complete from my standpoint. And not that it's becoming a pattern, but I do want it to avoid becoming a pattern, because I also think it creates where we do like things to be unanimous. And I think we talked through it, and it's one of the things that I've appreciated about this commission is the dialogue. However, when proposals are less than complete, individually we fill in the gaps, and because we're not reacting to what's actually there. I think today's was a good example, but we've had others, and I'm just wondering, maybe this is a question for Charles, but what is the path for us to codify what constitutes a complete proposal that comes before the staff and then us? What process would you suggest that we go?
Yeah, it's something that we've been discussing a good bit internally as we start our comprehensive plan update and our zoning ordinance update. As you know, we have a very old zoning ordinance. And so this hasn't really been evaluated in any depth in quite some time. And so what starting in July, we hope to kind of start this phase 2 of our zoning ordinance updates. It's going to focus a lot on development standards. and then it's going to kind of spin into the development review process and improvements to that. And I think those two options provide an opportunity to look at what information do we want to see on rezonings, on special use permits, and what information do we not want to see, and make sure that we're getting what is, what's the goal to get better development, to meet our development goals throughout the county, and we kind of filter out that stuff that we might not want. I see Bill Frisch just turned on his camera. He's who I'm working with together on a lot of this as we're starting to kind of map this out. So I don't know if he's got anything to add. Sure, we'll toss it to him.
I think a part of this will be coming back to you all to try to figure out what defines a complete application so that we can build that understanding for everybody. So everybody's working from the same set of rules.
And yeah, just to also react to that, I mean, we have a pre-meeting with the chair and vice chair and with Mr. Rapp prior to the meeting, just to make sure we're clear on the agenda and these type of things. And we did discuss the fact that we didn't have all the detail we would like, but we also discussed the fact that they had legally met the requirements for what they're supposed to provide. So it technically was a complete application. It just simply was not having all the information that we would like. And that's why the staff is diligently moving forward with working on trying to codify to require some more information. And as I've spoken with Mr. Rapp, I mean, he has experienced other localities requiring some things that Albemarle does not yet. Notwithstanding the confusion about the height and the special exception, that was an unnecessary confusion, I think. Not on our part, but just that should have been caught earlier.
And I think this is where getting some clarification about, so you said technically it's a complete application, and maybe it followed exactly what we are currently requesting. And that's my point, is that maybe technically it was, but certainly it left a lot to the imagination. And when we're asking to change the zoning from commercial, and there's a certain density that's being proposed, that we don't have clarity on the height because it's not in the proposal. So hence, I think that's incomplete, because I can't see how we can tackle that without understanding the height. We didn't really understand the massing. There was the issue of the setback that wasn't addressed. So I do think there's a number of things that, even though maybe technically they followed the current code, to look at, because for something like that, we should have a lot more information than what we received to do our job properly and to make the recommendations that the board is asking us to make. And I felt today we were not provided. We were given a lot of things, a lot of illustrative materials, and imagine if you will, but nothing in the actual proposal that was reviewed.
Right, and I think too that now recognize you in 1 sec, Mr. Herrick, and maybe you'll correct what I'm about to say, but there was also some confusion about when special exceptions do and do not come to us, and whether they're required to come to us. And we heard that staff could review them. We heard that maybe they go to the board, that they come up with the site plan and not during this part. So I don't think that was a satisfactory response for us. I think we need to be clear on that and then be consistent. So Mr. Herrick, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to make the point that there's a difference between an incomplete application and an application that isn't sufficiently constrained or isn't constrained to the commissioner's liking. I put in the chat the county code section that deals with complete applications. It's county code section 18-33.4. And there's actually a subsection of that deals with the staff's determination of completeness of an application. And I'm assuming that since this application made it before the commission, that the staff determination was made that in fact this was a complete application. Now I'm hearing Commissioner Carazana's concerns, and I would, I guess, characterize those as dissatisfaction that there was not sufficient constraint on the application, that they were asking for, I don't want to say a blank check, but that they were asking for a rezoning that wasn't sufficiently constrained, and that there was some discomfort among some commissioners about recommending an application that wasn't constrained. So again, I'd make a slight distinction between an application that's incomplete versus an application that makes requests that are unconstrained.
I appreciate that clarification. I mean, and I would agree with that. And I think that was certainly the situation today. What I'm hoping to get to is that we can clarify some of the parameters so that if an application in the future shows up like this, it actually would be considered incomplete. So there are things that we're missing that somehow, how can we put them into the process so that we're getting more information so that we can do a better job in making the recommendations that we need to make to the board.
I think we're thinking the same there, Commissioner Carazana, and that's what Mr. Fritz and I have been discussing. Is we actually have an extremely long and exhaustive list of the things that are required to be submitted, and we need to take a look at that list within our ordinance and modify that to ensure that we are getting the stuff that we want, so that it allows what you just said. To be a complete application, it has to contain certain elements. And right now, it does not get into things like building massing and height and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would say it's going to take some time for this change to be made. So to the degree that staff can communicate to applicants that while not required, the Planning Commission prefers to see more information in order for us to make a judgment on whether we can go forward with what they're asking for. Rebecca has come in and out a couple of times. She's got her hand up. If I could recognize her, and then Mr. Bivens.
Thank you. I have been listening the whole time, and we do apologize for that confusion about the special exception. But you may recall we had a ZTA a few months back to clarify in the ordinance who has the authority to approve a special exception, and that is only the board. So the Planning Commission is not required to review special exceptions. Like I said, there are some provisions in there where it can be referred to the commission, but the staff and the commission cannot actually approve a special exception. So we're carrying forward recommendations, whether it be from staff or the Planning Commission, when we take the special exceptions to the board. I just didn't want that piece to be lingering any longer as far as who the approving body is. And we hear you as far as this application in particular and what we need to pay attention going forward as far as some of the detail that you'd like to encourage applicants to provide while we're working on these other ordinance improvements. So thank you for that feedback.
Thank you for that reminder. Mr. Bivens?
So there's a piece of which I'm going to wrestle with my colleague here, because he's pointing out something that I've wrestled with for a number of years, and that we have had in the past what felt like very detailed and very specific plans come to us that my colleagues have had to remind me that they don't mean a hill of beans because they haven't gone through either the ARB if they're in an entrance corridor, or they haven't gone through site review. So it looks like we're doing something on a piece of property that makes sense for the piece of property. We've been excited about some of those, and they go forward to our supervisors. They say yes, and then the property gets flipped. And it gets flipped simply because of the zoning that we agreed to. Not the images that we all were enticed by, not the sidewalks, not the bike lockers for some of our former colleagues, not the electric chargers. That is something that I've been helping for, but simply because we changed the zoning on the piece of property and now it gets flipped to somebody else who says, well, I got the zoning I want. I'm now going to do whatever I want to do. I'll say right in that area that we were in this evening, we spent a lot of time on a piece of property on Prophet Road, had an extensive conversation about what we thought was going to happen there and its connectivity to North Point up there. The whole thing went to in a completely different direction after we approved the zoning map amendment for that piece of property. And so my piece is that however we do this, I mean, I would love to be able to get excited about what we're seeing is exactly what we're going to get. But I also don't know how we balance that. And so I'll be interested in hearing how Charles and Bill sort of come to us in a way so that we have more certainty in what we're saying, what we're moving forward to our supervisors is exactly what's going to be seen in this community. Otherwise, you know, we can make it a lot less complicated and say, yes, that's an appropriate use for that piece of property. Yeah, that's an appropriate use. Okay, goodbye and good luck. And so I'm not in the goodbye and good luck ring, but I also am recognize that I have been frustrated by seeing projects that we thought were going to be built and something completely different ends up going on that piece of property that has nothing to do with the images that convinced us that this was a good project. You're muted, Chair. You're muted, Chair.
Thank you. Just to be clear real quickly, you know, if you had an application that, you know, included things like you mentioned, like bike lockers and electric charging stations and whatnot, and it was in the application and it was proffered and we approved it, those would still have to carry forward. The issue of illustrations, it is possible for someone to proffer a specific building design.
We've seen that.
They can proffer the massing, they can proffer all sorts of things. We simply can't ask for them. They don't
typically do that. They don't typically do that. They don't
right.
typically.
Well, if you think about it, if they're, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but if they are not, if they don't want to constrain themselves, why would they necessarily? Now, the commission is saying we want to see more from you. We're more likely to be favorably inclined if we know what it is we're voting for. And the more things you actually proffer or codify or put in your plan of development, the more likely you're going to get a favorable response from us. That the vaguer you are, the less inclined we'll be to approve it because we don't know what the heck we're approving besides some massing and a particular use. I saw a couple, I thought I saw maybe some flutters of additional hands. Does anyone else want to comment on that? Mr. Fritz and then Mr. Missel.
Sure. This conversation, it mirrors a lot of the conversations that staff has been having. And I think that, and Charles has already said it, and I've said it, but I'm going to say it one more time, is I think as we go through this, we're going to be coming back to you and sort of trying to get an understanding of what are the expectations, what's the legal framework we have to work under through the state code, and then what are sort of best practices that can be done in Virginia and outside of Virginia, frankly, and then what are the expectations of the board, of the applicant, and of the planning commission, and try to build a process around that.
Yeah. Mr. Missel.
Thanks for the comments, Bill, and I echo a lot of what others have been saying. I just share a few things, having been around for 35 years in this area and having seen and worked with the county on a lot of projects. It seems like there's a little bit of a fair amount of variation over the years that has occurred in terms of the level of detail that's been required for different types of applications. And, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the amount of detail that was required for rezoning was extremely high. That sort of has fallen off a bit, and it's actually, I think, to the benefit of both the county and the applicant, and mostly for what Mr. Bivens said, that is, you don't see as a planning commission or as a board of supervisors something that you believe to be the case, and then in the end you find out isn't actually supported, like that situation where the property was maybe flipped. The other thing that I'll just mention is that at the level of a rezoning, the applicant, and preaching to the choir here, the applicant needs a level of flexibility to be built into their zoning that may cover some unforeseen conditions, some things they haven't actually discovered yet, that they would learn as they move further down the line. So for me, the amount of information that's in the rezoning versus the amount that's on the site plan versus the amount that's in a comp plan amendment, all of those things need to sort of be aligned, and the amount of detail has to be in accordance with the amount of information the applicant has at the time. So I think it's a balancing act. It's not that I'm disagreeing with what Mr. Carazana said or any others. It's been a challenge.
Sure. Thank you for that perspective on what's come and gone in terms of what we want and how easy or hard it is to move forward with applications in our county. All right, so more to come on that. Mr. Fritz, I can't tell if you're raising your hand. Okay.
No,
I'm afraid-
actually, what I am frustrated about is my raise hand function is not present on my Zoom. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yes, we've instructed staff to remove that. No, I'm just kidding.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah, that's right. Just kidding. I think probably my mic should be muted more. Anyway, with that, we have one more item, which is items for follow-up. I don't really have any follow-up for us on the comprehensive plan. I know that they had quite a few applicants for the Citizen Advisory Committee. And so once they get that finalized and figure out their schedule, staff will start working on the different topics they're sort of that they'll be working on. And I believe they'll be beginning with growth. I'm saying that wrong, Charles, aren't I? Development areas.
Phase one will be on growth management capacity.
Yeah, that's I was like, something about growth. I'm sorry, I'm tired. It's been a really long day. And several of you have already sent me your preferences for topics you'd like to engage with them on. So with that, I don't really have any other items for follow-up. Is there anything that staff has or any of the commissioners? Okay, great. So with that, we don't have any items for next week. So I move that we adjourn this meeting of the Planning Commission to March 15th, 2022. Everyone can agree by turning themselves off. I bid you all a good night and thank you for our very robust and helpful conversation. All we get are the complicated things. That's what's left of the Planning Commission. And so we'll figure it out. We usually do. I think we had some good outcomes tonight. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.